When people talk about trauma, they usually focus on the pain, the memory, or the quote-unquote scars left behind. But they miss the most critical part. Trauma doesn't just damage you, it rewires your entire operating system. It changes how your brain processes every single piece of information that enters your field of vision. If you are a trauma-born empath, you need to stop calling yourself sensitive as if it's a character flaw. You are actually hyper-perceptive. You possess a specialized form of intelligence that was born out of necessity. For most people, reading a room is a soft social skill they use to make small talk. For you, it was a survival tactic. You didn't learn to watch people because you were curious. You learned to watch them because your safety depended on knowing exactly when the mood was about to shift. Think back to the environment that created this. When you grow up in a space where emotions are unpredictable, where a parent's mood could flip from calm to explosive without warning, your brain has to adapt to survive. It becomes an elite-level scanner. You become a master at detecting the smallest tells that everyone else misses. You aren't just looking at someone. You are involuntarily tracking the micro-expressions in their eyes, the slight tightening of their jaw, or the subtle shift in their tone of voice. You can feel the heavy silence of a room before anyone even opens their mouth. This isn't a vibe or a feeling. It is your nervous system operating at a higher frequency than the people around you. You are essentially a human lie detector, not because you want to be, but because your brain was conditioned to never be caught off guard again. People will often try to gaslight you by calling this overthinking. They'll tell you that you're reading too much into things, or that you're being too analytical. But they don't understand that what you're doing is high-level pattern recognition forged under extreme pressure. While the average person hears words at face value, you are processing the subtext. You detect the glaring inconsistency between what a person says and what they actually feel. You can feel the resentment vibrating behind a polite "thank you." You can see the deep-seated insecurity masked by a loud, confident exterior. You are seeing the invisible layers of human interaction because your life once required you to be 3 steps ahead of everyone else's emotional state. It is important to realize that this ability isn't mystical or magical. It is neurological conditioning. Your emotional intelligence has been sharpened into a precision tool through years of high-stakes practice. You are essentially an expert in human behavior without ever having to open a textbook. You recognize emotional cycles before they even complete themselves. You know when a conflict is coming, when someone is lying to themselves, and when a situation is no longer safe. This level of awareness is a superpower, but it's one that was paid for with your peace of mind. Your brain became efficient at picking up noise that most people are completely deaf to. It's time to stop apologizing for how much you notice and start realizing that your perception is one of the most accurate tools you own. The most common mistake people make is looking at your emotional depth and labeling it as fragility. They see you get overwhelmed or notice you reacting to the energy in a room, and they assume you are weak or too sensitive. But they couldn't be further from the truth. What they call sensitivity is actually a high-definition radar system that they simply don't possess. You need to understand that you aren't reacting more than the average person. You are detecting more. There is a massive difference between being thin-skinned and being high-resolution. Most people walk through life seeing the world in low-quality 360p resolution. They only see what's right in front of them. You, however, are seeing the world in 4K. You see the subtext, the hidden motives, and the emotional currents that drive human behavior. You aren't imagining things. You are simply witnessing the layers of reality that others are too blind to notice. While everyone else navigates conversations at face value, accepting words as they are spoken, your brain is busy processing the metadata of the interaction. You are tracking the gap between someone's smile and the sadness in their eyes. You are calculating why their body language doesn't match their tone. This isn't a burden of character, it is a sophisticated processing power. You are effectively a human supercomputer, running complex emotional algorithms in the background of every meeting, dinner, or casual chat. Because you see the why behind the what, you have a level of insight that most people won't achieve in a lifetime. You understand people better than they understand themselves, and that isn't a weakness. It's an incredible form of social and psychological power. However, the real danger isn't the awareness itself, it's the total lack of a filter. Because your brain was trained to monitor the external world for safety, you likely never learned how to build a boundary between your emotions and the emotions of others. This is where the cost of being an empath shows up. Without a protective barrier, you don't just notice someone else's stress, you ingest it. Their anxiety becomes your physical chest tightness. Their anger becomes your sudden, unexplained unease. You become so good at anticipating problems before they happen that you spend your entire day pre-solving conflicts that haven't even started yet. You are constantly adjusting your personality, your volume, and your opinions just to keep the emotional environment stable for everyone else. This constant scanning means you become a world-class expert on everyone else's needs while becoming a complete stranger to your own. You have spent your entire life mastering the external world, learning how to placate, how to pivot, and how to protect. But in the process, you've lost touch with your internal signal. You are so busy managing the noise of the people around you that you can no longer hear your own voice. You've been programmed to believe that being useful or agreeable is the only way to be safe, but that is a lie born from your past. Your sensitivity was never meant to be a cage where you trap other people's pain. It was meant to be a compass that helps you navigate life with precision. The breakthrough happens the moment you realize that you can observe an emotion without absorbing it. You can see that someone is angry and recognize it as a data point without letting that anger live in your body. When you learn to stay in your own lane emotionally, your perspective shifts from being a victim of the environment to being the master of it. Suddenly, your ability to read motives becomes a strategic advantage in business, in leadership, and in personal growth. You stop being the person who gets drained by everyone and start being the person who sees exactly what is happening in any room. Once you stop paying the emotional tax for other people's baggage, your sensitivity stops being a heavy weight and starts being your greatest, most lethal advantage. For a trauma-born empath, solitude has absolutely nothing to do with being antisocial or hating people. That is the biggest misconception outsiders have about you. In reality, your need to be alone is about one thing: the absence of noise. You have to understand that for someone with your level of perception, being around people is a high-performance task. Every time you enter a room, your brain is working overtime to process, interpret, and emotionally manage everyone in your vicinity. It's like having 50 browser tabs open in your mind, all running video at once. When you finally step away and shut the door, you aren't hiding from the world. You are finally hitting the mute button on a world that is constantly screaming at you with its unspoken needs and hidden tensions. This is the only environment where you are truly free from the invisible requirement of managing the emotional climate. For years, you have been the unofficial thermostat of every room you enter, automatically adjusting your own energy to balance out the coldness or the heat of others. When you are alone, that responsibility finally stops. For the first time in the day, you don't have to worry about who is upset, who is lying, or who needs to be placated. Silence doesn't feel lonely or empty to you. It feels like an exhale. It feels like relief. It is a vital, non-negotiable recovery period for a nervous system that has been stuck in high alert mode since your childhood. You are quite literally allowing your brain to cool down from the friction of constant scanning. The world might look at your withdrawal and judge it. They might see your need for space as a sign of depression, a social struggle, or even a lack of confidence. They are completely wrong. What they see as withdrawal is actually active regulation. You are doing the hard work of bringing your baseline back to zero. You have learned the hard way that connection is not always nourishing. For most people, a social night out is how they recharge, but for you, it is often how you get depleted. You've realized that some connections come with a massive emotional tax, and sometimes the price of admission is simply too high. You aren't lonely. You are finally at peace because you aren't being forced to carry weight that doesn't belong to you. You have become selective because you've reached a point of high-level discernment. You know that not all energy is neutral. Some people carry a chaotic frequency that destabilizes your entire week, leaving you emotionally hungover for days. Because your past has taught you that closeness often comes with unpredictability or hidden expectations, your brain doesn't categorize every connection as a safe haven. It categorizes it as a potential risk. So you start choosing environments where you can control the input. You aren't closing yourself off from people. You are closing yourself off from chaos. There's a massive difference between being guarded and being wise. Over time, this solitude becomes your standard for clarity. It's where you find your own voice again, buried under the layers of everyone else's opinions and moods. It's where you stabilize your sense of self so that it isn't constantly being reshaped by external forces. You aren't avoiding life, you are protecting the quality of your life. By being selective about who gets access to your energy, you are making a conscious decision to prioritize your stability over other people's desire for your attention. This isn't a sign of a broken social life. It's a sign of a highly functioning, self-aware individual who finally knows the value of their own peace. This isn't distance. It's the ultimate form of self-respect. The depth paradox is the reason you often feel like an outsider, even when you're in a crowded room. You need to understand that there is a recurring friction in your relationships, and it isn't happening because you're doing something wrong. It's happening because most people simply aren't equipped, mentally or emotionally, to meet you at the level where you live. Your very presence acts like a spotlight in a dark room. Without even saying a word, you disrupt the social masks that people spend their entire lives perfecting. While most individuals are content to play a role and follow a script, you are looking straight through the performance. You see the gap between who someone pretends to be on the surface and the wounded, insecure, or authentic person they are underneath. This is a level of honesty that most people find terrifying. When someone realizes, consciously or not, that they cannot hide from you, they feel a deep sense of psychological discomfort. It feels invasive to them, even if you're being perfectly kind. Because they can't handle the weight of being truly seen, they have to find a way to make that discomfort your fault. This is where the labels come from. They will call you too intense, too serious, or over-analytical. They'll tell you that you take things too deep, or that you're making something out of nothing. Understand this clearly. Those labels are not an accurate description of who you are. They are a defense mechanism. They are trying to justify their own desire to stay on the surface because the deep water where you swim makes them feel like they're drowning. It's easier for them to call you broken or too much than it is for them to admit they lack the courage to be that real. This creates a painful, repetitive cycle that trauma-born empaths know all too well. Because you have such high-level pattern recognition, you often see someone's potential long before they do. You see their depth, their goodness, and the person they could be if they just healed their wounds. You connect quickly because you're operating on a soul level, but eventually you hit a hard ceiling. That ceiling is their emotional bandwidth. You want to talk about real things, growth, and the truth of the human experience, but they are only capable of small talk and surface-level distractions. You are trying to build a skyscraper on a foundation that was only meant for a shed. Eventually, the weight of your depth becomes too much for the connection to hold, and the relationship starts to buckle under the pressure. The issue here is not that you are too much or that your personality is overwhelming. The issue is one of capacity. Think of it like a hardware limitation. You are trying to run high-end, complex software on a machine that doesn't have the processing power to handle it. Many people retreat from you not because you lack value, but because they aren't ready to face the parts of themselves that you instinctively mirror back to them. When they look at you, they don't just see you. They see the honesty they are avoiding in their own lives. They pull away, create distance, or subtly shut you out because staying close to you requires an emotional honesty they haven't developed yet. You have to stop apologizing for your depth and start recognizing it as a filter. Not everyone is meant to walk the entire path with you. If someone finds your intensity too much, it's simply a sign that they have reached the limit of their own growth. It isn't your job to shrink yourself so they feel more comfortable, and it isn't your job to wait around for them to catch up to your level of awareness. Depth is a rare and powerful trait, but it requires a specific kind of partner and friend, someone who has the stability and the internal strength to look at the truth without flinching. Once you realize that the misalignment is about their capacity and not your worth, you can stop chasing people who are allergic to the very things that make you incredible. The greatest risk to your life isn't a lack of intelligence or a lack of talent. It is the silent, creeping danger of self-abandonment. For a trauma-born empath, your hyperperception is a double-edged sword. Because your brain is so wired for pattern recognition, you can look at someone's toxic behavior and instantly trace it back to its source. You see their unhealed childhood wounds, their past betrayals, and the fear that drives their lashing out. But here is the trap. You have spent so much time understanding why people are the way they are that you have forgotten how to judge what they are actually doing to you. You have mistakenly traded your boundaries for your insight. You stay in draining relationships and tolerate disrespect because you think that seeing someone's pain gives you a responsibility to absorb it. This is the hidden danger of too much understanding. When you can explain why someone is being manipulative, cruel, or inconsistent, you stop treating that behavior as a deal breaker and start treating it as a project. You tell yourself, they only act this way because they were hurt, or if I just show them enough patience, they'll feel safe enough to change. This logic is a death trap for your own happiness. Your ability to empathize with the perpetrator often overrides your ability to protect the victim, which in this case is you. Your insight becomes a weapon used against your own peace of mind. You end up giving endless chances to people who haven't even asked for them, all because you are more committed to their potential than they are to your well-being. You have built a life being an elite-level emotional manager for everyone else. You are deeply, intensely present for their crises, their bad moods, and their insecurities. You become an expert at de-escalating their anger and soothing their anxiety. But while you were being 100% present for them, you have become entirely absent for yourself. You have ignored the check engine light in your own soul for years. You manage emotions that were never yours to regulate and carry heavy psychological burdens that you were never assigned. You've become an accountability sponge, soaking up the mess left by people who are too lazy or too unconscious to clean up their own lives. You are exhausted not because you are weak, but because you are carrying the weight of multiple lives instead of just your own. The turning point, the moment you finally reclaim your life, happens when you change a single question in your mind. You've been conditioned to ask, what does this person need from me? Your brain goes into fixer mode automatically, looking for ways to bridge the gap and keep the peace. You must stop asking that. Instead, you need to start asking, what is this costing me? This is a brutal, honest shift that forces you to look at the math of your relationships. What is this person costing your sleep, your mental health, your self-respect, your physical energy? When you start measuring the cost of your understanding, you realize that you've been subsidizing other people's bad behavior with your own life force. This is where the shift from compassion to conviction begins. You can still understand why someone is broken without letting them break you in the process. You can recognize their pain and still decide that their behavior is unacceptable in your space. This isn't being mean, it's being accurate. Real change happens when you stop being a landing pad for everyone else's chaos and start being a guardian of your own stability. You reclaim your power the moment you realize that understanding is not a contract for self-sacrifice. You are not a rehabilitation center for people who refuse to grow. You are a person with a finite amount of time and energy, and it is time you started spending that currency on yourself. The final transformation of a trauma-born empath isn't about becoming cold or losing your heart. It is about moving from being an amateur who is overwhelmed by their gift to becoming a professional who has refined it. The top 1% of empaths, the ones who actually thrive and build incredible lives, don't stop feeling. Instead, they stop being accountability sponges. They realize that just because they can perceive someone else's baggage, it doesn't mean they are obligated to carry it to the next destination. They stop seeing their empathy as a wide-open door that anyone can walk through and start seeing it as a high-security gate. You have to understand that empathy without boundaries isn't a virtue. It is a form of self-destruction masked as kindness. When you feel everyone else's pain but ignore your own, you aren't being a healer. You are being a martyr for people who haven't even asked for your help. Refining the gift means you finally learn the most important lesson of your life, the difference between where you end and someone else begins. For years, your emotional borders have been blurred. You've treated other people's moods as if they were weather patterns occurring inside your own living room. Refining the gift means you put the glass back in the window. You can see the storm outside. You can acknowledge the rain, and you can even have compassion for the people caught in it, but you no longer let the rain soak your carpet. The goal was never to shut down your nervous system or become numb. The goal was to develop the discernment to say, I see what you are feeling, but I refuse to own it. This emotional sovereignty is the only way to stay sane in a world that is constantly leaking its chaos onto anyone who will listen. Once you draw that line clearly, the entire structure of your social life will undergo a massive shift. You will stop translating your depth into digestible, watered-down versions just to keep people from feeling intimidated. You've spent so much energy trying to be low maintenance and making yourself smaller so that others wouldn't feel the too muchness of your intensity. When you refine your gift, you stop doing that. You start showing up as the full resolution version of yourself. You speak your truths, you share your deep insights, and you stop apologizing for how much you notice. You realize that your depth is a high-level filter. If someone finds your honesty or your perception overwhelming, you no longer see that as a flaw in yourself. You see it as a lack of alignment. This is the most liberating realization you will ever have. Some people walk away from you not because you are too much, but because they are not enough for the reality you operate in. They don't have the emotional hardware to handle the software you are running. They don't have the courage to be seen as deeply as you see them. When they leave, it isn't a tragedy. It's a massive upgrade in your environment. You are clearing out the noise so that you can finally hear the people who can meet you at your level. You stop chasing connections that require you to mutilate your own spirit just to fit into their narrow boxes. The ultimate secret of the refined empath is that empathy is only a true strength when it includes yourself. If your compassion doesn't include your own needs, it is incomplete. You start becoming accountable to yourself first. You prioritize your own peace, your own schedule, and your own mental health over the temporary comfort of people who are committed to staying stuck. By drawing these hard lines, you aren't being selfish. You are becoming sustainable. You are ensuring that your gift remains a precision tool for the people and projects that actually deserve it, rather than a leaking battery that is drained by anyone who happens to be nearby. When you stop self-sacrificing to maintain a connection, you finally discover what real connection feels like, one that fuels you instead of emptying you.